Well, hello everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Leadership Gaps here. I'm Florian Lung, and I'm so delighted to spend this morning with you, at least here in Sweden and Denmark, with my teaching partner, Alena Ipanova. Welcome, Alena.
Hello, Florin. I'm happy to be here, all the way from Malaysia.
Well, thank you for joining us here, and we're excited to have you. And it's been a little break since we had the last one, so we thought we should come back to our viewers with a topic that we think it's relevant for this time of the year. Now we're like in mid-December, or mid-November, and it's going to be soon December. And one of the topics that we know is going to be on people's mind is about the appraisals, the yearly reviews, the end of the year kind of check-ins. And I know one of the big elements in that is feedback. So today we're thinking about, talking about how do you really offer feedback, and, what are some challenges that leaders face with feedback. And I know you have a lot of experience in that, and also insight that you could share with us. So that's the topic we want to talk about today.
Yes, definitely. Very important topic. And I would say it's relevant every day of the year, not only in the end of the year, right? We know it from our practice. And just trying to make it very practical today and sharing with our both perspective. As I know you, Florin, work a lot with leaders, coaching leaders, and I'm deeply curious to hear what are the challenges that you hear from them, what challenges they face when it comes to feedback. And I will gladly add my perspective as I work with cultural intelligence, how to add the cultural lens to feedback to assure that it actually lands. So suggestion from my side is to actually start from the definition. What do you think feedback is, or how would you identify feedback, Florin?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And when I think about feedback, it's more like when you're driving your car, you're going in a destination. And if you are, for example, taking the wrong turn, at one point, we used to have these like external GPS that we put in the windshield. And I used to drive through France with that. And many times the GPS was very slow, and I would, make a wrong turn. But then the GPS will let me know, give me some feedback, say, hey, Florian, that was the wrong turn. Now let me put you back on track. And so in my view, feedback is more or less having a GPS, having a compass, having, something that tells you you're on the right path, or you're maybe taking the wrong turn, or maybe you are off track here a little bit. And without it, we could actually be very lost. We could actually be, like we used to drive with a map. And then the map was more or less like, here is where I want to go. You can put a finger on the map, but without the red dot that tells you here is where you are, then you cannot really kind of make you cannot see what the difference is between where you are and where you want to be. So for me, it is like a mirror, like an indication, like a check-in to really see that we are on the right path or we're not on the right path, in an opportunity to kind of correct course. What's your view?
This is a great analogy. I really love how you use different metaphors and different stories to, like, when we, through our conversations in general, it makes it so visual. I always think of feedback as a conversation. Because also looking at it from the culture perspective, in some cultures, one-on-ones might look very different, and expectations might be very different. It might look as a download, like I'm a manager, I'm having a meeting or one-on-one with a team member. So I'm just sharing my feedback without any, input from the other side, because this is how things are done. And if we imagine that now we work globally, remotely, hybrid, with people from different backgrounds, people who have different experiences and different expectations, if we don't align and if we don't create space for the conversation, then it rarely will lead to action. At least this is what I see in my experience.
Yeah, I love that you use the word conversation, because I really believe that's the case. And it invites one of the things that I see is the biggest challenge that leaders face, is that they think these meetings should be very formal. So I had a conversation with a leader that they had an underperforming employee, and this underperformance, sometimes that's a whole topic. I'm not going to go there, but it's more or less misaligned expectations. Okay, so when you think about underperformance, it's like, as a leader or manager, I expect the person to do something or to perform in a certain way. They are not performing in that way, so then they don't meet my expectations. So then that invites the opportunity for us to give some feedback. Okay. The challenge with that is that this person that I was coaching, they thought, oh, now I should book a feedback meeting. No. Stop. Don't book a formal feedback meeting, because it will look exactly as you said. Think about being an employee and being called to a feedback meeting. What do you expect there? How do you go to a feedback meeting? I would be, ready to defend, right? Because very defensive. Because I don't know what that feedback look like. If it's negative, I will have to explain why is that way. So then all of a sudden, the person receiving the feedback gets into very defensive mode, where they try to explain why it is that way. So I don't encourage at all to have formal feedback meetings, but I encourage feedback to be woven into the conversations that we're having. So that's why I like the terms, where the way you put it, it's a conversation. In you also open it very, very well at the beginning, that this is not like, I know we're doing this at this time of the year because it's a relevant topic on many people's mind, but it's like a year-round topic. So if you have actually had these conversations with your people, with your team throughout the year, then you should be fine, because now you don't really need to have a formal, feedback meeting. You don't need to have a formal, let's say, appraisal that will be kind of very formal, because there is no surprise. You had the opportunity to talk about their performance. You guided them, you give them feedback. They done some things, you discuss those again. So that way that's, I think, where the term continuous feedback comes from.
This is a good check-in, actually, for anyone listening. If you feel you are in the space that, or actually we had these conversations continuously throughout the year, and I would just give some appraisal, that's it, because I shared everything, we discussed everything, then you're in a good place. And if you don't feel like this, I think it's good if you're aware of that. This is already the first step, right? So then you can think about what you can do differently in 2026. How do you want it to be? And maybe it's a good opportunity to also discuss it with others. And while I was listening to you, Florin, there were so many things that came across when you shared about feedback, having it as a formal meeting, scheduled conversation. And from my experience, what I see, what prevents feedback from landing well, or generally having it as a continuous conversation, is the lack of psychological safety. When people feel that there is a threat if I speak up, and especially when power dynamics plays role there, and again, coming from different cultural backgrounds, we might have different expectations from how leadership and team relationships should look like. How much details do we need? How much instructions do we need? Do we need to know how to do things exactly? Or do we need just to know what we should do? So aligning those expectations and asking people what it means. This is a good question, like not running on the assumptions, but actually asking people what it means, asking them to explain certain things or to clarify can also help to create the alignment and maybe to get the conversation started. So normalizing those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about psychological safety, again, many leaders have heard about it. Probably they know it's important, but they might not know how to create it, like, and also how to know if they have it or not. What would be some signs that they should be looking for to know, okay, this is a sign that we have, or my people feel secure, or they feel psychologically safe, or these are some signs that they don't?
This is a very good question, and the tricky one as well, because actually psychological safety, what I see in different surveys, is very much correlated with trust in corporate service, which could be, we could differentiate that actually, because trust is more, it's built one-on-one, and psychological safety is one towards the group. Am I free? Do I feel free to speak up? Do I feel that I can actually share some negative information or bad news, and we can discuss it? Am I feel threatened or not? These types of things. So definitely you can look for some signs, or you can look for specific answers in surveys, but it just scratches the surface. It might indicate that there is a problem, or you might just miss it. Because I worked with teams where people felt like, oh, actually, we have informal communication style, and people have sense of humor, and they really connect well. But then it comes to the second part, data. Because whatever we see on the surface, it's one thing, and I love using data. And then again, data is very powerful depending on how you use it. So using data to see exactly where the problems are or where the challenges are can be very helpful. And not all the tools, or definitely not surveys, can provide that. So you need to use specific tools. I have some in my pocket. We are not going to discuss them now, but there is a possibility to actually identify where the issue is exactly, and then build up conversation around it. And to the question of creating psychological safety, I always challenge this formulation. You can't create something if you don't have a base for that, if you don't have a foundation. So first of all, you have to remove the blocks and explore the things that are preventing people from speaking up. You might notice that you ask a question, there is silence in the meeting, or there are some people who speak louder than others. So just look for some imbalances and dynamics, and also measure things and work with data in a healthy way, to actually have more conversations and to remove the blocks, and then you can start building and creating. So this is my experience and my general suggestion of how to work with this. Then feedback will land differently as well.
So it sounds like if I am the leader and I'm the last one to hear the bad news, then people don't feel safe to bring that news to me.
This is a good question to discuss with people. I remember I wrote a post in LinkedIn about, would you tell your manager that you are looking for another job? And the same question you can pose to yourself as a manager. Would my team feel safe to tell me that they are looking for other positions or not? And the answer can tell you a lot already. So you can start building up from this question.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in order, like, because I learned a principle recently. It's called like this 1% improvements, right? Because I think we're looking for these big changes that is going to solve all our kind of issues, or is going to now make feedback very easy for me. I'm going to feel comfortable in doing it, and my team is going to feel like safe. And that's maybe the ideal, but there is not like one, magic pill or magic wand that we could just wave and do that for you. It builds on small incremental changes, and the kind of 1%, I call those 1% improvement here, 1% improvement there, that will actually create the kind of environment where feedback is appreciated, and people want it and seek it, and you also seek it as a leader. So what would be some, like 1%, if you just look at, small shifts in what we already do, but maybe we're not doing the way we should, that if we do that little shift, it will actually move us in the direction of getting, better feedback discussions or better conversation? What will be some of those things? Maybe 2 or 3 things that very slight changes that we could apply.
I love this question. And I have so many ideas. I have 10 things in my head to share. But I think if we like bring it to the, to the ground in general, if you want to build up this competence, I would say like usually we have negative connotation when it comes to feedback, but it's also positive feedback. And sadly, many of us are too bad at giving positive feedback. We just don't give it. It's just taken for granted. Whatever people achieve, even if it is exactly that 1%. I really like this approach. And if you create like a mental picture for yourself, like what's that 1% that this person improved actually over the past quarter? What could that be? Right? So thinking from this perspective, so I'm just elaborating on what you share. And improving the ability to give positive feedback. You notice something positive, share it, because it's very difficult to make feedback continuous if you are not used to that. But then starting with giving positive feedback is easier way to actually come to the point when it feels more natural, because we want to normalize it. We want to have it natural. So start noticing and just noticing what people do better today from what they did yesterday. And also notice it yourself, for yourself, what is your 1% that you are improving? So this could be one of the things. I want to hear from you. What's your 1%?
Yeah, so if there is one thing that would really move the needle, we're talking about these small shifts, it's still 1%, but I think it's going to have a big impact, is to make it a little bit lighter conversation, meaning we take it too seriously. And this is something that it's an influence principle and a negotiation principle, from sales. So if you are with a client, if you are with a team member, and you're discussing a decision that you put a lot of weight on. So if you put a lot of weight on a decision, on a project, or on a situation, then whatever you decide, it feels like so important, because this is like, life-changing decision for me to join a project or not to join a project. So if you feel like this is life-changing decision, like, to maybe, marry someone or get into a relationship, then you maybe want to think about it, longer, and maybe consider some things. So everything we discuss seems to be very heavy, and, is like these very heavy conversations, where in fact, whether you choose to go on this project or not, it's not going to be the end of your career. You can actually work on that 6 months. You realize it's not going to be, what you want, and you can actually always shift. So it's like using a little bit of humor, or a little bit of anything that would light up a little bit the situation. It's like, oh, this is not like, oh, it's not a disease. Like, you're not going to die from it, right? And so, yeah, it's not a disease. Yeah, well, yeah, of course. You can always like, yeah. And so people laugh a bit, and then you actually talk about whatever it is, right? So, or you just kind of prepare the landing. So this is another principle that I like. It's again a very intentional principle, where you go to see a doctor, and they would gonna maybe give you a shot, or maybe they were gonna take some blood, for example. They sometimes say, hey, this is gonna hurt a little bit. What do? They prepare you for the landing, right? So you now prepare, you expect, stamp. And so when you prepare, they say, oh, well, that was not that bad. Why? Because you were prepared, right? So one thing you say, well, this might sound, this might sound bad, or this might sound that I'm criticizing your work. And so you kind of prepare a bit the conversation, or the the situation for them to be, a bit more ready for whatever, because sometimes you really need to do some to give some feedback on if you really misalign on your expectations. Those are the situations where I think I agree with you that we don't give enough positive feedback, but that would be the easy win for people. So let's say if a leader sees the achievement, it would be easy for them to congratulate someone on that. But when they see the gap between where they want the person to be and when the person is, that's more difficult many times. How do you actually communicate that, right? So when you have a bad news, right, or you really need to give some feedback that it's constructive, then you want to soften the landing a little bit, okay? So you can make a little bit of a joke, or not a joke, but like just say something that it's not about someone. It's like I said, well, this is not gonna, we're not gonna die from it, right? This comes, you say, now it's a difficult part, but you're not gonna die from it, and they'll laugh. Oh, yeah. And then you actually go, and it just kind of relaxes a bit the situation. So it's not like very formal, very, very serious conversation. Although it is.
It depends on the relationship. What do you think? Because sometimes the relationships might be strained, and each conversation, regardless of, what you talk about, it will just feel sharp and personal, and we can't get away from that. If we are in good relationships and there is some constructive feedback, it might land in a better way, I would say. So how do you go about when there is tension, but conversation needs to happen?
And that's when this emotional intelligence, and in your case, cultural intelligence, come into play. Because you need to read the room. If you feel the person is like with the guard up, then there's no point for you to actually give any feedback or any input at that point. Like, this is a very common situation. But let's say we have opposing views on a matter, okay? And I need to discuss this with my team, okay? So if I start the conversation about a topic and I see we really have opposing views, what I found is that force negates. So meaning so if we would have the chance now to, you put your palm up and I put mine, and then I will push through this screen, and then you'll feel the pressure. What do? Naturally, you push back. I don't tell you what to do. You do this with teams. If you ask them to just, do that with your colleague sitting next to you, if one person starts to push, the other person starts to push back without you don't give them the instruction, you should push as much as you can. Naturally, when we push someone, the tendency is to push back. We had a formal or an informal conversation about our kids, right? When we actually push them, and that they push back even harder, especially when they see us that we have powerless and resourceless. So this is true with employees as well, right? But it's just that naturally, when we see that the message is not landing, we may have a tendency to push harder because we really want the message to land, but that's when there is no chance for it to land, because is this tension, is this very, they are gonna measure every word that they say, they're gonna try to interpret every word that you say, so it's not gonna go anywhere. So if you just do that, you're gonna just tick the box that you said it, but it's not gonna get any meaningful result or any meaningful change. So that's when you use your emotional intelligence, your cultural intelligence, to read the situation, is this the right?
If you have developed those, right? So if you have emotional intelligence, if you have cultural intelligence, so that's why these are not soft skills, right?
Okay, if they don't have it, they should hire you.
And you,
and us, because I don't have. I mean, if you don't have it, then you're gonna try to do this to the best of your abilities, and you're gonna believe, people don't understand me, people don't get my feedback, this is not working, I am trying feedback, it doesn't work, I don't know what to do. But that's an indication that there's something that maybe you're missing, that maybe there's something that is happening, maybe there is some non-verbal communication that you're missing. So if you're stuck with that, then that's an indication that maybe there are some areas that you could develop to really read the situation better. Because I mean, there is a principle, again, one of these 1%, if you think about this mindset shift, the rule of communication, this I learned from John Maxwell, it's kind of hard truth, but that's what it is. The rule of communication says like this: the responsibility of the communication success always lies on the side of the communicator, never the receiver. So if I don't get my message across, it's not that I have a bad team, it's not that my team doesn't listen, it's that I'm not using the communication channels or tone of voice or mechanics, or my communication is not adapted to the situation.
Can I turn it to a different angle, Florin?
You can.
Because I don't completely agree with that. I feel that there are two sides, and I feel that it's also, if I'm a receiver, I also feel that I have the power to actually check in if I understood things right, or if that was the meaning, because most of the problems in communication happen because we make assumptions, because our brain there are some gaps and our brain automatically fills the gaps. And then depending on our previous experience, depending on our cultural conditioning, we just run mostly on autopilot because it saves our energy. We might think, oh, if we have strained relationships, then, oh, this person means really like this, not in a good sense. Or sometimes when you just change the way you ask questions, you can turn the situation to a more positive space, to a more open space for discussion. And one of the things that I would like to share here, I got this thought again while listening to you about the receiver mode, that we are usually trained how to give feedback, but we are not trained how to receive feedback. This is the thing. And now in the end of the year, I get lots of requests, and I also see my colleagues working in the field, and they run workshops on feedback. And the majority of cases is, how do we give feedback so that it lands? So maybe we should record another show to how you actually receive feedback. But receiving feedback is a skill as well. What do you do with that? How do you turn it into conversation? How do you turn it to your opportunity to grow? And again, we need safe space for that. But then if I'm someone who receives feedback and I feel that, okay, actually, I don't know how to act on it. So I want to ask the question. I want to ask, okay, what's the outcome that you expect from me? And this is support that I need, so that we don't feel like two opposite sides, but we feel like we are in one team. If you are winning, I'm winning as well. So if we have this mental shift and we view each other as one team, then I think the conversation itself will land in a better place. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that, and it sounds like the ideal scenario. There is only one challenge with that, is that we cannot change other people. So the model will assume that if I give poor feedback, that I expect you to tell me that I give you poor feedback. So for the situation to change, I expect you to change. Like,
not necessarily.
Sorry?
Not necessarily. I think that it's just it's trying to simplify it a little bit more. In ideal situation,
yeah,
when we have receiver and we have someone who provides feedback, I would say that both need those skills that we mentioned, cultural intelligence and emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
And if they don't, Yeah, if they don't have them, or if one person is more aware than another, then it can just this person can take responsibility in shifting conversation to a more productive space.
And everything we share today is about what you can do. Like, as an individual, if you're watching this today, we're talking about what you can do, either if you're a receiver or if you are the person giving the feedback. So if you're on the receiving end, right, then what you just share, it's absolutely true. You want to help the giver to actually get, that you're maybe not getting the message, help them clarify the message. If you are on the giving end, and if you're saying that my team doesn't get me, what I'm saying to you, no, is the team is not the problem is not your team. The problem is you. So the whole idea, or why I think whichever side of the communication you are only able to change what you do, because I want people to feel empowered. So how you empower people and leaders is by telling them it's their responsibility. If I tell you, oh, your manager is the problem, then all of a sudden I took away the power from you and I give it to your manager. So that's what I want for people to feel, this is your responsibility, and which means that you can change it. So I think John came from that perspective where he says, if the message doesn't land, you look at how you deliver it. It's not, you don't have a bad audience, right? You can be a bad communicator. So the whole idea was to help leaders to understand that they are responsible, and then to just maintain that responsibility, because with responsibility then comes some freedom, because if you know you are the problem, then you can actually improve on that. And if I would say, well, I would agree with a manager or a leader, oh yeah, your team they don't know how to receive feedback, then they will say, okay, well, that's not my problem. There's nothing to do on my side. So I think it was more like for us to take responsibility for that communication. So either if you are now a receiver, then your communication towards the person giving you feedback, that's your responsibility. So if you, let's say, want to get more context and they're not getting your question, it's still then your responsibility. So I think it's probably mixed up a bit between feedback, receiving feedback, and giving feedback. But whenever we're communicating, if you didn't get this principle, it's because I didn't explain well enough.
Okay, that was a good turn, Florin. As we are closing up nearly, I would like to ask you one very important question. If you are to give one most important tip to leaders to follow in relation to feedback in 2026, what would that be?
Yeah, I would want them to shift their mindset between this feedback being something that it's a formal thing that we do, and I need to include that into my conversation, all that, into seeing that you have plenty of opportunities to actually give feedback to your team and receive feedback. And we actually probably do it, but you don't call it feedback. So let's say you have a meeting, a team member, and you're looking at the project, and they have, let's say, worked on that project in one direction, and you think that that's not the direction you would want the project to go. Now, you having a conversation about how that's not the direction, that's feedback. So that's exactly what you told them. You're giving them feedback that there is now a deviation from the target, and now you're helping them see what the target is, or maybe you both lost your way in the process. So I would want you to identify the situations where you're anyway discussing a topic, a target, a project, an activity. If you're preparing for a meeting and then the team member wants to check in with you before the meeting, actually your conversation with them is you giving them feedback. So just look at what you're already doing and see how you can actually integrate some of the things we're discussing right now into those conversations. So that way feedback becomes a little bit more tangible more easier for you to achieve and do, rather than see it as a standalone, very structured process. You're already doing it. You already have conversation with your, every time you discuss with a team member, you're giving them feedback. It might not be the ones the kind of feedback you want, but you're giving them feedback. If you acknowledge a win, you're giving the feedback that that's important. If you don't acknowledge the win, you're giving them the feedback that that's not important. If you take their side, you're giving them the feedback that they should feel safe to come to you when they have a challenge. If you don't take their side and kind of throw them, under the bus, then they get the feedback that you're actually not going to be on their side. So probably they shouldn't make any mistakes or bring those to you. So that's, I think, a very, it might be subtle, but it's a mindset shift that will help you see feedback in a different light.
I love this method, Florin. Thank you so much for sharing.
What's yours? If you would give leaders one thing that they should be doing differently, or one shift, or 1%, shift, what would that be?
I would say develop cultural intelligence, because the culture lens helps you so much in adapting your communication style, because even feedback is a lot about communication, is a lot about reading the room. And when you are able to notice things, and to give a very specific example, that some of us are direct communicators, we say what we mean, and others are more indirect. So we might start with the context and then come to the point, and the point can be very subtle. So we need to learn how to navigate those aspects. And this is something that we experience every day in our communication, in every interaction, and also something that shows up in feedback. And we might take someone who is very direct as being rude, being pushy, being too critical towards us, or someone who is very indirect, like, okay, what's going on? I don't understand. What's the point in the whole conversation, right? So cultural intelligence helps you create this lens, develop this lens, so that you can adapt your style in the process. And emotional intelligence follows up there as well, because emotional intelligence doesn't transfer across cultures. So you might be very emotionally intelligent in your current setup, but then let's send you to the main office in India, for example, and let's see how your understanding of emotions and interpretation lands there. So it can be very different. So definitely it can help. So that would be a pro tip for me. Start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this international environment, and with teams being more and more connected and more diverse, this is even more important, more and more. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if we have any questions, because I don't see anything coming up, but it might be something on our end in our platform. But if you have any question and you put those in the live stream, we're going to get back to you in the comments. So Alena and I, we're going to review those, and we're going to be more than happy to answer those. If you have anything more specific here, feel free to DM us on LinkedIn or on Facebook, depends on where we're actually watching this. And we might get one more episode before the end of the year. We might not. So keep an eye open on when we're going to post about the next one. But thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Alena, for sharing your expertise.
And thank you, Florin, for this conversation. And I like when we have disagreements, we have some productive, conversations there. It's really feels good. Thank you so much for today.
Well, this is actually what we're trying to teach others, right? So if we both agree, then it's like I'm not getting any feedback from you. Is this landing? If you only feedback, yeah, you're doing good. Well, how good? Like what made sense? What didn't make sense? What connected? What didn't connect? What resonated? What didn't resonate with you? We need this. Like otherwise, I'm gonna be in the dark, and I would not know. It's maybe comfortable to hear yeses and to be praised, but you're not really growing because you're not really improving. So yeah, thank you so much for also pushing back.
Okay, my kids taught me that. So
well, they
see you in the
well.
next episode.
Absolutely. It will be my pleasure. Take care, everyone. Thank you for
Thank
watching.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.